Hi, so today I'm going to be talking about the 2019 movie The King. Main character, Henry V, played by Timothée Chalamet. And I'm going to talk about how accurate that movie is. Well, first of all, you have to understand that it is loosely based on true events, but it's already an adaptation of Shakespeare's group of historical plays called the Henriad. And although the plot and the characters did actually happen, that were actually real people, changes have been made for the play to glorify Henry V and also to fit into a 2.5 hour screenplay. So I've divided the play into 6 parts, so here it is. First of all, Henry, the main character, is the Prince of Wales, Hal. Well, Hal was simply a nickname given to Shakespeare's portrayal of the young Prince Henry. Also, Henry was never actually supposed to be king because his father wasn't king. It was the king was actually Richard II, and Henry the Fourth, who would go on to be Henry's father, who would go on to be Henry the Fourth, ended up dethroning Richard and becoming king, therefore establishing Henry as Prince of Wales and heir to the throne. He was emotionally distant and was never really interested in succeeding his father, although I don't really know if that's entirely true, but I can't find any evidence to prove that it wasn't. He would apparently spend his days drinking, whoring, and jesting in Egypt with John Falstaff. Now, this is the first major inaccuracy of the play and movie because John Falstaff was not a real person. He's a fictional character created by Shakespeare to accompany he's involved in this Henriad. And Egypt is a real street and was the main meat market in the city of London. In the movie, it is portrayed as this place where there are some brothels, and it was kind of not a meat market, but a wild street. But yeah, it was a meat market back in the day. Well, Henry IV summons Hal, who, like I said, is just a nickname. No one really called Henry Prince of Wales Hal, but he summons him to court and says that his brother Thomas would inherit the throne if instead of Henry, who was the oldest one and the heir apparent, which is not entirely true. I don't think that ever happened. Thomas would have only been king if Henry had died first. Well, Thomas is sent to subdue Hotspur's rebellion and is staged by Hal because he arrives there and engages Hotspur in a single combat and kills him without any further conflict. Well, Hotspur is the name given to Henry Percy, who was a real person and was behind the deposition of Richard III and was actually an ally of Henry IV, and they did eventually fall out. So that part's true. But Thomas wasn't involved in the Battle of Shrewsbury. Like I said, here it says that there is this hand-to-hand combat between Henry Prince of Wales and Henry Percy, but that never happened. There was a battle. It is called the Battle of Shrewsbury, and Henry IV was actually there, unlike in the movie, and Hal was there. Although he was wounded in battle, and Henry Percy was killed in battle, not in hand-to-hand combat. Also, Thomas complains that Henry had stolen his glory, but obviously this didn't happen because, first of all, Thomas wasn't even involved in the battle, and Henry was actually wounded, so there wasn't that much glory for young Hal. And also, Thomas is said to be killed in battle shortly after in this campaign in Wales. Thomas was killed in battle, but in France, and under the reign of Henry V in one of his campaigns in France. So he was killed after Henry came to the throne. Like I said, there was no intention of Thomas coming to the throne before Henry. And that constitutes the first part of the movie. Next part is when Henry IV dies. Apparently he dies in bed and Henry is present. I do not know if that's true or not. I think so, but Hal is then crowned Henry V, and from here onwards, Shakespeare, I think he stops referring to Henry as Hal. I think that's only his nickname when he's prince, but I'm not entirely sure on that, so don't hold me to that. Well, there was, in the movie, I don't think it's shown, but there is this terrible snowstorm during the coronation, and it's seen by some as a bad omen of the rain. Although, the reign of Henry V wasn't that bad. It was, England was kind of successful during the French Wars, and I don't think it was a bad omen, just a bad day. Well, he wants peace and conciliation, and which is kind of true. Like with his father's adversaries, not with France, obviously, but with people, especially in England, he wanted peace because he was a young king. He wanted to be successful. He didn't want rivalry. And apparently, at the coronation feast, according to the movie, the Dauphin of France sends Hal a ball as an insult, which Henry chooses to see as a reflection of his boyhood. I did not find any record of this actually happening, so I don't think it was true. Everything that I've seen of this is from the play or from the movie. Well, his sister, Philippa, Queen of Denmark, actually cautions him that nobles in court could have their own interests. And this plays a part later on. This doesn't seem significant now, but it does. It does play a part later on in the movie. Well, that is the second part. That's very short, and here comes the third part of the movie. Hal interrogates this captured assassin who claims to have been sent by Charles VI of France to execute Henry. These nobles, Cambridge and Grey, are approached by French agents to try and induce into the French plot. However, there are no French agents involved in the Southampton plot, and this, obviously, spoiler alert, because, it's a movie, but in case you kept on watching and you haven't seen the movie and you don't want to find out, well, stop here. But this plot is all made up by Gascoigne. I think it's Gascoigne. A character in the movie. And there are obviously no French agents involved, so that part's fake, but it's supposed to be fake. Well, this whole plot is called the Southampton plot and was an actual plot to kill Henry by the English, but yeah. Cambridge and Grey approach Hal's Chief Justice, William Gascoigne. However, Gascoigne became Chief Justice during Henry IV, but ended up quitting soon after Henry V became king. So he wasn't really that involved, and he had no involvement in the Southampton plot, but also no involvement in Henry V's government. Which, going back to Philippa's comment saying that you can't trust nobles at court, that was completely true. That still holds true with men in power, but she is foreshadowing Gascoigne, but in the real life that didn't really happen. Well, Gascoigne advises, the movie Gascoigne obviously, advises that the show of strength is necessary, and so Henry goes on to declare war on France and executes Cambridge and Grey. These are executed because of the plot, but the war on France was declared to exploit weaknesses in France, not because of any plot. This plot was uncovered just when Henry was about to go to war with France. So the plan to go to war had been in place before this plot actually really took place. Well, before going to war, Henry appoints Falstaff as chief military strategist. But again, like I said, Falstaff is a fictional character, so that could not have happened. And that ends that part of the movie. Then we go on to part 4, in which the army sets sail for France. And they complete the siege of Harfleur, or however you pronounce that. Thomas, the brother of Henry, is involved in the siege, but obviously in the movie he died, so he's not really mentioned. And I don't know if I'm remembering this correctly, but in the movie it's not portrayed that the that the English suffered a lot, but in reality they did. They lost a lot of men, and they were really tired. So, Henry decides to keep on going with the campaign to France, but is stopped by the Dauphin. The Dauphin here was Louis, portrayed by Robert Pattinson, and I don't think the actual in real life there was Louis. He was one of the sons of the King Charles VI, but he wasn't the Dauphin of France. And also, he was nowhere near the battle. I think he was in Paris. So that part, I mean, the Dauphin's involvement in the Battle of Agincourt in the movie is significant, but in real life, obviously, it didn't happen. Henry encounters this vast French army gathered to face them. Is that completely true? The English wanted to go to Calais, maybe crossing the Somme, but were intercepted by the French and were forced to fight. That part they actually got right. Well, Dorset advises Hal. I think I've said Hal before, even though I was said that I wouldn't. But if I say Hal, it's Henry. But even Shakespeare, I think he only refers to Henry as Hal, as Prince. But anyway, Henry or Hal is advised by Dorset to retreat, but Falstaff proposes this false advance to lure the French into the muddy battlefield, where they would be weighed down, and they would be attacked by English longbowmen. And meanwhile, this was happening. This large, lightly armored English army would be in the woods. Now there were woods surrounding the battlefield, but all the troops were in the field. Like, there weren't any troops hiding in the woods. Maybe there were some, but not significant to the battle. And the actual battlefield was in a really advantageous area for the English because where they positioned, it was actually narrower, so it was not preventing any French attacks, but making them more concentrated and kind of easier to fight. Well, that's part 4, that ends that part, and then part 5. The actual Battle of Agincourt. Now, this is a completely real battle, one of the most famous ones in the 100 Years' War, even though the 100 Years' War were 3 wars in a 116-year period, but whatever. And it's one of the most famous battles in English history. Henry VIII was fascinated by this battle and really admired Henry V for this, and it was a glory for the English. Well, Henry, in the movie, apparently offers to fight the Dauphin, goes to his camp, and says, hey, let's fight one-on-one, like he had done with Henry Percy. Of course, the thing with Henry Percy never happened, and the Dauphin, like I said, was nowhere near the actual battlefield, so this could not have happened. Well, the Battle of Agincourt commences. In the movie, a bulk of French army charges to engage with Falstaff's force and becomes weighed down in the mud. Now, this kind of happened, but not really. What really happened was that English longbowmen advanced rather than any knighted men and went into killing range, prompting the French cavalry to advance. And well, that's how the battle starts. Rather than Falstaff with his men, obviously Falstaff was not a real person, but rather than knighted false advance, it was English longbowmen preparing to attack. Well, Henry leads a flanking attack in the movie, and this small English army overpowers the immobilized French, but Falstaff is killed. Well, it's true that the French greatly outnumbered the English. Some reports saying 2-1, others say 5-1, but the French obviously outnumbered them. The English, and Henry does lead the troops at Agincourt, and well, they win. All prisoners are killed, which is completely true in real life. It's because Henry thought this small group of French, I think, went around. I don't really know why, I forgot, but Henry thought this was maybe a possible attack in the rear, and then killed all prisoners to prevent anything from happening. And he killed, like I said, all prisoners. In the movie, he just kills them because he's mad, but all prisoners died. And in the movie, the battle is decisively won when the Dauphin comes down from his horse and says to Henry, "Okay, you guys are tired. Let's fight you and me one-on-one." He goes down from his horse, and then he goes to charge against Henry. He slips, and then Henry sends signals for his men to actually jump on the Dauphin and kill him. This obviously did not happen because Louis, like I said, was nowhere near the Battle of Agincourt. But he died in Paris shortly after. But yeah, the battle was won by the English. There's no doubt about that. And that ends the 5th part. And here comes the last part of the movie, part 6. Well, Henry reaches Charles VI and is offered a surrender and the hand of his daughter, Catherine of Valois. Well, Henry returns to England in 1415, just after the battle, and then returns to France to sign the Treaty of Troy Troy, I think it's pronounced, in 1420, and this is agreed. It's also said that Henry will become king after the current king of France died, but obviously Henry died in 1422, just 2 years after the treaty was signed and before the king of France died. And then came the Wars of the Roses, so that didn't happen, and that's where Henry VIII gets this idea that he should be king of France. Although this idea comes all the way stemming from William the Conqueror, because he was Duke of Normandy, but Henry the Eighth, his claim comes from Henry V and disagreement with in the Treaty of Troy. Fun fact: Catherine of Valois, when Henry dies, goes on to marry Owen Tudor, whose grandson is Henry VII. So they're connected, they're related. And with Henry V, she has a son, Henry, who at just 9 months old. Henry V dies, and he has Henry VI. And he's just 9 months old. So there's a lot of infighting with advisors and Wars of the Roses. That's how they start. Henry V was the last stable king. Well, technically you could say that Henry IV was the first one in the Wars of the Roses, but really the Wars of the Roses actually started with Henry VI. But anyway, that's not really relevant. Not even mentioned in the movie. Well, Henry returns to France with his new wife after this whole thing is arranged. He does in 1420, and she challenges his reasons for invading France and denies the French actions against Henry. And then Henry confronts Gascoigne and kills him. Obviously, this did not happen because Henry knew perfectly well what the plot was about, and Gascoigne was nowhere, he wasn't involved in this plot. He had quit many years ago, 1413, when Henry came to the throne. But, and for the movie makes sense, and supposedly it's said that in the movie it seems like they're going to live happily ever after, but again, Henry dies just 2 years later. Fun fact: Louis the Dauphin in the movie, his real life person, Louis, son of Charles VI, dies of dysentery, the same thing that Henry would go on to die of in 1422. And that is it. Well, I forgot to say that during 1415, 1420, there were other conflicts in France, 1417 mainly, but not really mentioned in the movie because apparently this Battle of Agincourt ends any conflict with France. This obviously is an attempt for Shakespeare to glorify Henry IV and Henry V, especially Henry V in this case, and it's whole English monarch propaganda, even though the events themselves could be just used as propaganda. Shakespeare decides to glorify them even further, and anyway, that's to glorify the image of the monarch rather than of Henry V himself, because this is written during the Elizabethan period to glorify the image of the monarch and therefore Elizabeth. I just said that the battle itself and all the wars with France were enough propaganda material by themselves, And that's what happened with Henry VIII. He was amazed by Henry V and really admired him. So yeah, that is the real story behind Netflix's The King. Main character Henry V, portrayed by Timothée Chalamet, and it's a really good movie. I haven't seen Shakespeare's play, but I've seen this movie and I really enjoyed it, even though I knew it was an adaptation of an adaptation. So the history behind it would be kind of not really true. So yeah, I hope you liked it, and yeah, thank you for watching. Bye.